Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Neil Carney. This is Split Peak Soup Podcast. I'm here with Shaun Burns. Shaun's an amazing surfer. He's a family man, and he's involved in some pretty cool stuff here in Santa Cruz. So we're going to dig into all of that. Shaun, thanks for coming. I'm super stoked to have you today.
Thanks for having me on, Neil. It's a rainy day outside, so good day for some soup.
Yeah. Dude, we're gonna dig in. I'm hungry, so I'm stoked. And we just had like pretty much our first significant rain. Maybe you had a couple other sprinkles, earlier in the year, but fall's starting, and we got some rain. So hopefully we get some sandbars here pretty soon.
Yeah, I think we're all itching here in town. Early November when we're talking today. So I think it's getting into that surf season that we're all looking forward to. It's been kind of a sleepy summer for me, at least. So
yeah,
excited for some waves rolling into town.
Definitely. Yeah, get those sandbars just primed and juicy. And we had some pretty sick sandbars last year. I'm not going to disclose any locations, but saw you there a couple times. And I think it's pretty cool when certain waves break in town that really aren't, habited by any particular, crew, and then they kind of light up. And I think it's cool to see people from other sides of town, and kind of it's like a little meeting place, and obviously surfing, we don't really want many people, but, I think I was going to talk about this because you're from the west side. This is the east side. It's where I grew up, and it's a real segmented kind of situation here in Santa Cruz, where I feel like me growing up, like I pretty much stuck like religiously to like Pleasure Point and those areas, and I'm pretty close here, like it's just like walking distance. But is that kind of similar for you? I know that I see you at like Pleasure Point, here and there, but can you kind of explain how that feels growing up here? And it's almost like there's two different towns. Like the west side is like almost like a whole different like zone.
Yeah, totally. As you know, growing up here, it's like a different surf city, west side. And this winter is going to be interesting. First winter with like the Murray Street Bridge closure.
Right.
So it's like just getting over to the east side requires a little bit extra step, or getting to that, that sandbar, at least for the west side. I think it's a little easier to get there this winter, so I'm happy about that. But I was actually thinking about that the other day too. I was like, didn't want to drive over to the east side because I thought it was going to be a 20-30 minute drive with traffic, during rush hour. But then I was just thinking about all the people that drive over the hill or from hours away just to come surf here. They surf for a couple hours and then go home. And I'm like being a baby about it, saying I don't want to drive 20 minutes across town. But there's just so many waves on the west side. Predominantly I surf the lane, and there's always waves at the lane. It's one of the most consistent waves in town, but Pleasure Point is as well. So I love coming over here in the summertime and surfing the points that get pretty good on the south swells. But we're so many surf spots in Santa Cruz. It's so unique. It's crazy. I think there's like 31 surf breaks in like just like the, I think 7-8 mile radius of like natural bridges down to like Capitola, which is crazy amount of surf spots. So when I was growing up, I thought it was really important to like diversify my surfing, because I was like getting into the QS, and obviously that's a lot of like beach break surfing. So I think like I probably could have done that a little bit more, like down to like Manresa area. Like I think Admiral Pogel and all those guys would, religiously surf down there to prep for the QS, but I wanted to surf a little bit more on the points. So yeah, the lane, the point, Seward Peak, all those places are the spots that I wanted to surf the most. But yeah, then you got like 26 and some places that are a little bit more beach break like that are good to get amongst. I don't know. There's so many ways in Santa Cruz. We're so fortunate to have so many, like such a variety of surf spots.
It's wild. And I think, the ringleader for that kind of era for getting guys down to surf like shitty waves like Manresa and stuff was Galley. And, obviously roadies in that picture as well. But I think Galley was just like a competitive machine. And I think it really helped his, success in those professional events to go down and surf those dog shit waves and kind of like, get that 3 to the beach or whatever, but I think it's really difficult, because when there's real, we live in point breaks and there's like well-formed waves and, especially if you're like a local, you can paddle out to a certain spot and get waves and real clean waves and be able to open up your turns. And, that really helps the rail game. But, I think that for the competitive surfing, that was a pretty important thing to do. I didn't do it quite as much. I was going to just touch on with the east side, west side thing. Like, I think, how old are you?
33.
Yeah. So I just turned 40. So I'm probably like 7 years older. And I think, there used to be this thing that was built up and it was, it was organic, but it was also a product of like the surf industry and the surf media where there was this like rivalry between the east and the west side. And it was kind of this thing that was played up for, the public to kind of get this intrigue about Santa Cruz. Like, and so for me, like, that was like a really real thing. Like I was kind of terrified to go surf the west side, especially I think, there's a little bit of a reputation on the east side for some gnarly guys, but the crew on the west side was like super terrifying. And I think particularly, there's this one little barreling wave on the west side that like, I didn't even surf my whole life until I was like 25. And I was just terrified. There's a couple like gnarly ringleader dudes out there who I heard these stories and I'm just like, dude, fuck that. I'm not going over there. And then I think one day I was talking to Rufo and I was telling him that and he's like, just fucking come surf it, dude.
Yeah.
Like, and I surfed it and I had no problem. I saw a bunch of my friends and I feel like, it was just something that, was almost imaginary. There was a realness to it, but have you ever had any experiences like that where there was maybe some like trepidation to get out of your comfort zone on the west side, or and even to this day, is it kind of strange to come into a different side of town and just rock up to a place where guys surf every day and you want to get waves, and I don't know, how was that for you?
I think surfing, what I love a lot about surfing is it like teaches you a lot of respect. And I think here in Santa Cruz, growing up as a surfer, and a lot of surfers here in town have a lot of respect for each other. And so like, even just coming 4 miles from the west side over to the east side, you're like, a lot of places in the world that's considered the same break, same area. But here in Santa Cruz, there's like such fine line of a boundary of like kind of where you're from, and we all know each other, but like it goes into like the local, respecting the locals there. And so anytime I'd come over to the east side, I'd make sure that, I knew who was from there and who grew up there, and I just wanted to respect them and give them their waves. And so I wasn't trying to battle anyone to, paddle around or get waves over them, because I wanted to respect them, because I also kind of expected that back when east siders came over to the west side. And most people were good, because I feel like growing up in Santa Cruz, you learn that. And so there was kind of like a mutual respect. I think a little bit more back in the day. Yeah. It was like, it was a physical respect, there was, you kind of had to earn it a little bit more, which was, you've heard all the stories, and I'm going to sound old saying this, but I feel like the kids got it pretty good these days, because it's definitely more of like a welcoming attitude in the water. But I think that's in surfing. It's you kind of got to respect the ocean in a way. Like the ocean kind of humbles people in that own type of way, I guess like Steamer Lane, the waves are big, it'll kind of take care of itself. But I think growing up in Santa Cruz, we've been fortunate to see so many good surfers, seeing them in the lineup, and surfing such like a cool sport that you get to surf with like your heroes and your, role models and people you look up to, where like if it's any other sport like basketball or football, it's like if there's a pro from your area, it's like you're not ever seeing that person. They're traveling and going to stadiums and working with their team. But like, yeah, just seeing like growing up and like seeing someone like Flea or Rat Boy and like just being out in the same water with them is pretty wild. And so you learn to kind of like respect them because they've put in the time and energy to like be where they are.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's definitely kind of like times, changing here in Santa Cruz, but I think there's still that respect dynamic in the water here in Santa Cruz, which I really appreciate, because then you go to a lot of other places around the world and you kind of don't really see that respect as much, as it's kind of more just like a free for all. And yeah, it's like, it's so simple, but it's kind of funny, just those like guidelines of surfing, that you see at the stairs, of just like who has the right of way, and hang on your board. And I think it was Sam Reed that put him up at Cowles and at the lane on the west side. But people can be kind of oblivious these days, and they just overlook all that stuff, and they obliviously paddle out there, and they don't know that there's a 5-foot high tide with the increasing swell, and next thing you know, there's safety here on East Cliff.
Yeah.
I think like right at like 38th area, there's been every summer and winter, there's been multiple rescues these years. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like my take on like that east side west side dynamic. But growing up in Santa Cruz, very fortunate just to kind of like learn the respect from surfing.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because you'd think like, you're not going to just be like playing horse at the, Jade Street Park and have Steph Curry rock up, it's like, you're not going to have that exposure. But like here, you paddle out on a good swell, and you're going to see someone who was your idol, and they might tell you to go on a wave, or, they might, see you get a good wave and like give you like a little like nod or like a hoot or something. And that's pretty special and pretty unique thing about surfing. And as far as like the respect thing goes, is like, yeah, us who grew up here and who are kind of involved in this scene and these communities, we're gonna have like a more in-depth knowledge about how things work and have it work smoothly. But then, like you said, there's people who just paddle out oblivious, and they can be a real safety hazard, and it's frustrating. I do believe in, I think owning a wave is like a pretty silly thing, but I do feel like if you put in work, if it's your neighborhood and you're like, you've done all the things you need to do to get to that place where you can get those waves and be accepted by the pecking order, it's just kind of like, it's like somebody spitting in your face when you see them paddle out and just be so oblivious. And so that's kind of one of the challenges that we deal with here in Santa Cruz, and that surfers are dealing with everywhere. I think especially COVID is like all these adult learners started coming out of the woodwork. And I think that, yeah, it's been pretty frustrating, but all we can do is just, continue to surf. And I feel like we get our waves, it's kind of something that we can do, and we do it well. So
yeah, I think like, it's not saying we own the waves and, we deserve more waves than anyone else, but it's just, I think people need to, growing up here, you kind of learn that through surfing, but people that are kind of getting into surfing maybe later in life, sometimes they don't like learn that through surfing, and they kind of just get thrown out into it. So
yeah.
I'd, I guess just encourage people to do their due diligence on like looking at the factors of surfing. And it's just, in Santa Cruz, there's a lot of lineups, and it's point breaks. So it's like waiting your turn in line, right? It's like every grocery store, you wait and turn in line. You're not going to like paddle around or step around someone just to get in front of them to check out sooner or get a wave over them. So it kind of naturally, like I was saying, like the waves here, like naturally just demand respect,
right?
In, a humbling sense, but also just the way they're situated. And so, yeah,
yeah, and it also helps too to have like whether it's a neighbor or like a relative or something like that, somebody at a young age who can take you under their wing to kind of bring you out and show you the ropes and teach you that respect. And a lot of people just kind of go in it blind. They don't have that. And I was gonna say, like, did you have someone like that in your life, like an uncle or like a neighbor, like who taught you to surf, who like showed you the ropes and stuff like that?
Totally. Yeah. I think growing up, my dad was like my biggest influence, down at Cowles Beach, just getting on the nose of his surfboard are some of my first memories of just being in the ocean and surfing. But I played a lot of sports growing up too. I was in football and baseball and basketball. So I was kind of pursuing that aspect when I was around, 9 or 10, and then started to surf with my buddy Nat Young, who we all know in Santa Cruz. And we had a good gang of surfers, and it wasn't kind of until I started hanging out with them that I thought surfing was rad and wanted to, surf with them every day after school instead of going to baseball practice or whatever. So that was like my biggest influence was my friends. My dad tried to push surfing on me pretty hard, but a few nose dives and water up the nose, you get pretty over it pretty soon. So luckily I was able to hang out with Nat and all my buddies who were so just, Nat especially was just so into surfing and competing and just loved it. And you could tell he just like had this like competitive nature of like he was going to be pro for sure. And myself and a few of our friends, we just wanted to like be there and enjoy the aspect of surfing. And yeah, I don't know, as a Grom around here, you're having so much fun just being in the ocean and around the beaches. And yeah, like you said, all the pros from back in the day, and surfing was so different back in the when I was growing up in like the early 2000s, of all the cold water classics and contests coming up. It was a rad time. But yeah, I'd say my biggest influence on my surfing is just being with my friends and finding that like crew of guys that just loved being in the ocean and didn't want to like be hungover the next day or go partying. It was more about like getting some sleep and then like looking at conditions and being in the water all day.
Yeah, that's something unique too. I think about like your generation with like, especially with Nat and stuff like that. It was a real pivot from, I would say like even my generation and the guys like a few years older than me, the party scene was like super intense and dark and like kind of scary. And a lot of those guys, were being rewarded for having that kind of edge. And like I mentioned the surf media earlier, it was like this kind of mystique that was surrounding Santa Cruz in the surf industry. And, guys were getting paid like quite a bit of money just to be your, probably like 25 dudes were making like, maybe not like a huge, like, living off of surfing, but enough to like buy a new truck and to be, styled out with all the gear that they need, sent on trips. And, unfortunately that kind of fed some egos that kind of got a little out of hand. And that's one thing I think it's super cool. And I think that was a positive thing, was that, especially there on the West Side too, and not to like, say that the East Side didn't have those problems, because it did, and it took a lot of like really talented surfers down. But you and Nat were like kind of a generation that kind of like broke through from that and pursued surfing in like a pure kind of way. And so that's really kind of like a cool thing and something I admire about you guys. And let's just talk a little bit more about like like your road to becoming a pro surfer, and then especially like having someone like Nat to like, he's the most successful surfer to ever come out of Santa Cruz as far as like ratings. And the salary that he was getting was just like crazy. And that must have been really useful to have, but was it also kind of like discouraging sometimes, like in the sense that somebody who you're growing up with is like they skyrocket to this whole nother level? Or was it something that like fed you, that said like, I want to be where Nat is, kind of?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. That guy's so just competitive in everything he does, whether it was like surfing or like getting you back at a prank. He'd go above and beyond.
Yeah.
So he kind of always just had that like competitive nature in him that I looked at it as like, yeah, it was kind of like, I looked at it as it was psyching me up. And yeah, I never made it to like the CT where he did. It's like you give him the credit because it's he worked really hard on it. Yeah, just thinking about like Galley, going back what we were just talking about, like surfing waves at the beaches. Nat was up there with his dad, Dennis, when he was like 10 years old. Dennis would drive him up to Waddell. Get out, go surf.
Yeah.
It sucks, but you're surfing.
Right.
And I'd go up there with him, and, I didn't want to go out there, but he was like, this is going to be good for you guys. And he kind of saw that. So I think growing up with him and just my friends, I kind of found a love in surfing, and I loved competing. I feel like, putting yourself, that jersey on, you get that pressure and, those butterflies, which I think is a good thing to do. And like, I enjoyed doing that, but I kind of, when the decision came to whether I was going to really pursue surfing or a different route. I had the opportunity to attend Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo for college. Very fortunate, my family was able to afford that for me to put that in, because I know that's, not an option for a lot of people, especially, a lot of surfers, when I was making that decision, weren't even really thinking of that route to go. But luckily I had a few family members and some friends that were kind of seeing the bigger picture for me. And so that was probably the best decision I made just for myself personally, was to pursue academics and education. And so, yeah, I got a degree, bachelor degree in environmental science that I'm using today, which is pretty awesome. And, but still surfing more than ever and love competing on the board riders.
Oh yeah.
So I'm stoked there's those competitions and those clubs to still put on that jersey and feel that pressure.
Fully. And I think I'd graduated from UCSC in like 2007. And so I feel like from the time I was 10 and then going forward, like I had sponsors from head to toe, free stuff. Then that turned into like getting like a little money to like travel and do that. But I wasn't ever really getting like a salary or anything like that. And I think, it was almost a good thing, because probably right around the time that you were attending college was like right after like the global financial collapse, and all these big brands like started to not be able to sponsor like 20 dudes on the in Santa Cruz to pursue this. And so I'm assuming, and I'm pretty certain that was almost like a good thing for you as well too. But it is sometimes feel a little bit like, God dang, like I might have been in that kind of like ring of guys who are able to, really pursue it. And, but at some point, the wheels fall off in anyone's surfing career. It's a young person's sport, guys like Slater, I guess, and Jordy Smith are the exception in that regard. But was there a point where you were getting like some like decent coin for surfing, and at what point did that kind of, because I'm sure that even after you were in college, you're an amazing surfer and like a great representative for a brand, but was there a point where like that kind of started to dry up a little bit more, and it was kind of like more apparent that you had to kind of like diversify your pursuits?
Yeah, good question again. Just trying to think of like that time. But I graduated Cal Poly in 2015, and that's actually the time that I put into traveling and competing on the World Qualifying Series. So at the time it was international,
right?
And I had a lovely girlfriend who's now my wife, who loves to travel more than anyone I know, and she's actually really good at traveling and just finding flights and train tickets. And so she said, oh, there's a contest in France, contest in Spain. And so she started looking into it like with me, and I was like, wow, how rad's this? Like,
yeah,
I'm going to travel with my girlfriend and do all these contests. And so I really owe her so much credit, because after college, we took off to follow the QS pretty much. But what I owe credit to her is I wasn't, I was competing and loving it, but we were like seeing the world more, where like a lot of my competitors were kind of just living and dying by the results. I would make a few heats, and then we would be in France, but like, let's go to Paris for a few nights. And a surfer in Paris had my board bags, just dragging them through the streets of Paris. What the hell are you doing here? But
yeah,
I got to see the Eiffel Tower and like see that culture. And we traveled around Australia and, Philippines and Indonesia. So I kind of did that for about 4 or 5 years, was getting a few results, got a second out in NEOS at a QS 3000, which kind of upped my rankings on the QS. I think I made it up to like 140 or like top 150, which was like the best I did. And so it was at that time that you mentioned that, like the surf industry was definitely changing, where there wasn't like, it was so weird because when I was growing up, everyone had a sticker on their board, right? Like if you did contests and you had results, you were getting backing from the top companies.
Yeah.
But then it started to change where like there was a lot of people competing that didn't have stickers on their board. They weren't getting supported, and so they're paying their own way. And as you know, traveling the world, that doesn't go very far,
right?
Unless you have a lot of support, whether it's from a sponsor or family. And so I think it was around 2017 or 2018 that I was kind of like that 140 time, and I was getting some help from O'Neill, who's been, very supportive of my surfing, but there's only so much that they can do. If you're a 140 surfer, they're not paying you CT level money. And so I came back to Santa Cruz and looked into, what was awesome is I came back and I was like, I have this degree, like all the, looking at these applications, and they required a degree. And I was like, wow, like I have that, like I can apply for some of these cool jobs. And I found one with Save the Waves that I was like, just to become an intern. And I dove into that world of conservation around surfing and kind of applying all those, methodologies to like look at surfing in the ocean and protection measures. And so I kept surfing, but then, dove into a world of kind of, needing to work a little bit more and ended up loving it too. Like seeing a different part of the surf industry, not just on like the, competition side, but kind of the conservation side.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where I fall at now. So yeah, I was kind of around when I got my job with Save the Waves in 2021.
Yeah.
Which is when I kind of fully dove into kind of the surf conservation world.
Yeah. That's a really awesome pursuit there. And, I want to get into that, but I just wanted to touch on just one of the other changes that kind of happened in that time frame that you alluded to, was that, the surf magazines crumbled and print pretty much for all intents and purposes died, and it became not so much like as, related to like how good of a surfer you were, or, I mean, that had a lot to do with it, but it wasn't exactly like the results. It was more like you got eyes on you with your social media presence. And I feel like, it's kind of like for people who are like really stoked on good surfing and seeing good surfers like do well, it could be discouraging because, now you've got guys who it's like, whether they're like creating like TikToks or, like doing prank videos or whatever, or just they're just like a model too, or something like that, which, like bars guys like me. So is that kind of like, isn't that trippy now that like everything, it's like, and social media is just, it's just like it's cool to like connect with people, but it's kind of a toxic thing to like be basing your whole like life around, and to be like successful, it seems like that's a huge like part of it now. So just wanted to know your thoughts on that whole like phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, you have a podcast now, so
yeah, I can't say that
you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's all those avenues of kind of of the surf world. And yeah, that's an interesting point. And one thing that I was thinking of is like, I've been on O'Neill for 13 years, and, half that time, they're asking me at the end of the year, what were my results? And so I had to get back to them, filling out that spreadsheet of, I got third here, I got fifth here, I got 33rd here. At some point it shifted to not what are your results, but how many followers do you have?
Yeah.
How many views do you have? I'm not sure exactly kind of what year, but to today now, that contract is looking at how many followers you have,
right?
How many views you're getting, how many posts you've done, how many collaborated posts you've done. And that's not just O'Neill, that's the surfing world that's looking at that. And so in a way it's good because there's pros and cons to it, right? I mean, the pros, I see it as like, there's so many avenues to become a pro surfer now. There's the YouTube vlogs, there's the podcast. You can kind of find your own niche. And I mean, for myself and my, surfing career, it's kind of looking into like the conservation world and kind of giving back and looking at ways to preserve surf breaks. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and then the cons of it, is like just asking for the amount of followers you have that's not, very, personal, or I mean, just like, you don't want to just like sponsor someone just because they have so many followers. And then at that turning point, there's people buying followers just so they could show their sponsors they had this many followers, and there's a lot of fakeness to that,
Yeah.
So it was like a really interesting turning point of the surf world. And so, but then, yeah, like going back to the positives, there's people making a living off surfing without a main sponsor.
Yeah.
But maybe they're getting paid to do a post or paid to do a video, and they're pursuing sponsors or pursuing, their surfing career through different avenues.
Yeah.
Which is, it's cool to see that, these days. And yeah, I watch, some of the vlogs like Nathan Florence and all those guys, like he just got a Red Bull sponsorship pretty much because he had the slab tour and had all his vlogs, and he's sailing with his brother John, and it's just kind of created that lifestyle that people want to follow. And so yeah, you can get a Red Bull can in there. That's what they want to pay him for
sure.
Yeah.
And also, like, from the perspective of like a company, it's like, in the past, they would, throw you some free gear and give you some coin here and there, and just kind of like with the hope that, people would see you, not just like surfing contests and like being like the guy in town, like that. They're just like, hopefully people see that their sticker is on the nose of the board, either in a photo or in real life. And that's kind of like a dicey thing. That's a gamble, and they might not pay. The return on investment might not, really pan out. And so now it's like, it's almost like strategic, because you could see exactly how many people saw that photo. And there's no like, well, yeah, that surfing magazine was next to some guy's toilet and he might have got like through half of it. But now it's like, this is like a metric that can be like observed and really like, scientifically almost approached. So I understand from that perspective why the companies would see value in that. And it's just kind of like the way the world is these days. And we, if you want to, do well, you're going to have to adjust and make those sacrifices with your dignity sometimes for the things that you post. And if it's cringe or not, like, that's just the name of the game these days. And, but I wanted to, go back to the Save the Wave thing, because you've been involved in that, and there's a really cool study that just came out that you're involved in that really took a look at, these surf breaks around town, and basically what value that surfing has intrinsically on the economy. And can you just describe like that study?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And it was a pretty groundbreaking study. It's pretty rad to get into. So this is the stuff I love working at, a nonprofit, doing some surfing conservation work. I was down 2 weeks ago and just presented in Laguna Beach about the study to the surf industry, the SEMA folks, and got to, talk about the surfing industry and the surf economy. And so through this study, we analyzed 31 surf breaks in Santa Cruz in the World Surfing Reserve, which is a program of Save the Waves. And so Natural Bridges down to Capitola. We looked into what is the economic revenue that the city of Santa Cruz is getting just through surfing. So people traveling here to come surf, they stay at hotels, they go get coffee, get a breakfast burrito afterwards, and then they go home. Or people that live here, they want to stay here, and, rents are skyrocketing, but we all want to stay here because of the waves. And what do we spend our money on? Do we buy our surfboards? Do we buy our wetsuits? What are we buying in town? And so we did a 2-year-long study with a survey that surveyed people about those questions on how much they're kind of spending in the city of Santa Cruz on surfing. And when we found out that there is an economic revenue of $194.7 million just in the city of Santa Cruz.
Wow.
Off direct and indirect expenditure through surfing.
Damn.
So we all knew it was going to be this big number, right? And it was funny, like going through the project, I was always asking people, like, what do you think it is? How much do you think the surfing revenue is going to be in Santa Cruz? And they all came back. They knew it was a lot, hundreds of millions of dollars. But now, like, going back to your point of like having data, because we're like such in this like data world that we live on, and people, numbers talk, right?
Yeah.
We have a number on like how valuable surfing is in Santa Cruz. And so being a surfer myself, and like only a surfer knows the feeling, like you've heard that phrase.
Yeah.
But to people that don't surf, we kind of have this $194.7 million value. So hopefully you can feel that.
Yeah.
To those people who kind of speak numbers.
Right.
And So, I just presented to the city council last week. Yesterday, I was actually at the county of Santa Cruz and presented this project to, all the board of supervisors. So they're aware of how valuable surfing is.
Right.
We weren't just surfers going up there and saying, protect our waves.
Yeah.
We hit with this study and they're super stoked to get it.
Yeah.
They're like, thank you so much for doing this work. What do we do?
Yeah.
And so we had a number. The study is so deep. It goes into also kind of like the vulnerability of surf breaks. So as we've seen, the last few winters of like how erosion is happening right in front of our eyes, coastlines have been changing for thousands of years. It's inevitable. There's more people on this planet than ever before. And it just seems like, every winter, the erosion and destruction is just getting more and more intense. Santa Cruz Wharf, Capitola Wharf, Seacliff, State Beach, West Cliff was closed for a year. There's all these like crazy changes. You overlay that with, sea level rise projections, which can, be a lot of assumptions. But you look at like the surfability in Santa Cruz and how that, with sea level rise and all the changes, through erosion, surfing is going to decrease in Santa Cruz. And so with the help of our partners that looked into the economics of that, you can overlay that if you're losing out on surfable time, you're ultimately losing in economics, in surfonomics of Santa Cruz. And so that $194.7 million value, that's going to decrease if there's less time to surf Santa Cruz, or if there's water quality issues and people hear about that from, outside, Monterey, and they're like, I'm not going to go to Santa Cruz today because the water's bad, or the waves closed, the access is broken, so I can't access it. And so we looked at those vulnerabilities, and then we presented to the county. And so there's the local coastal plan, which is like the big kind of plan that cities have to send to the California Coastal Commission to get approved. And in Santa Cruz, surf breaks aren't characterized in those local coastal plans. And so our big ask of them is to make sure that, through this study of surfing economics and, surfing vulnerability, that we need to characterize and prioritize surfing and surf breaks into that local coastal plan, but also any type of future planning along the coast. It's a hot topic right now just on, coastal development, and we don't know all the answers to like what should be done, whether it's hard armoring or a hybrid approach. And, people talk about managed retreat, and I just think it's time that we start looking into surf break protection more, and we start building those committees of people to, getting surfers and developers and city planners in the same room. And hearing from the surfers. And so what I love about working at Save the Waves is it tries to elevate the surfer's voice, because we really see them as like the canary in the coal mine of seeing firsthand experience of what's changing. And so I really loved about this study is we worked with people like Frosty, Peter Mell, Sean Dollar, Tyler Fox, Matt Myers, Austin Smith Ford, people that have been in the water and seen changes. And so I think just by prioritizing surf breaks, hopefully the county and the city can, acknowledge this study that we did to really consider surf break protection going into the future with their planning. And so we'll see where it goes. But excited that project just came out last month.
Yeah, and like it brings up the question is like, what do we do? And I wrote an article like maybe a year or two ago about managed retreat, and that's kind of the the thought process in that is that sea level rise is inevitable. It is happening, and whether or not you believe that or not, like you can't turn your back on the reality that waves are powerful and destructive, and over time the waves are gonna strip the sand that protects the cliffs, and it's gonna degrade the cliffs, as we see like Steamer Lane is falling into the ocean. And that might really, you probably have a more up close and personal perspective on that because you're surfing there more often, but that could really change the way that wave breaks. And when all that sand gets stripped away, it's basically the the cliffs aren't going to have that natural protection, and if the sea level rises, it's going to be like a perpetual high tide. And when you surf a break where it's like next to the cliffs, high tide, it's like it totally fucks the wave up. You get that refraction and stuff like that. And so, I spoke with Dave Revel, and he's really smart dude who's doing all this research into how this is going to affect, and he's got some ideas. Like, I mean, I don't know how realistic it was, but he was like, yeah, we need to like divert sand like from other places, and bring it to Santa Cruz to like armor the coast, and other ideas like that. But in your opinion, do you have any like ideas of like the things that we can do to help save the waves?
I think the sand bypass project that Dave has worked on and looked into is a potential, adaptation solution. But that's just like that, thinking outside the box is like really where we need to go. I don't, think one solution fits all, because Santa Cruz is so unique. A lot of waves are cliff backed, which puts us in an unfortunate position, because it's like there's not, like in Southern California and places around the world, it's a lot of sand and beaches. And Santa Cruz, with, the cliffs, manage a tree, there's not really anywhere to go, like it's not going to like help the waves out as much. And so I just think of like thinking outside the box of what are these hybrid approaches that we can do. Can we build, maybe some type of like, hard armoring or like jetty thing to capture more sand? Can we use sand nourishment to fill in some places with more sand? And so it's kind of dissipating waves offshore a little bit more. There's been talks of like offshore reefs and adding them, kind of like how Sabre Jets, protects the cliff there on the west side. But we're in a pretty severe sand shortage right now. I don't know. Like, I mean, growing up on the west side, its beach is like not a beach anymore.
Right.
It's crazy. It's like, I remember like being in high school, it was like a huge beach, like the whole time. And there was always like the east side of the beach, like was where all the locals went and you'd hang out. But now it's waves literally hit the cliff there and they splash on to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I've seen people just get rinsed right there that have no idea. And actually, I've seen someone like almost get like knocked over, like an old elderly person, like almost fell and like they just got soaked. So kind of creates a safety issue as well. And so I just think, looking outside of the box is kind of like where we would need to go with like planners and the city council. And in the city is kind of like what I said is like, you can't just come and dump rocks at a surf spot.
Yeah.
Like Richard Schmidt kind of always said a quote that kind of resonated with me, or he told me this story, less than a quote, but he was saying, back in the 70s, he showed up one day and the Army Corps of Engineers was dumping riprap, which is just those boulders along the entire West Cliff. Yeah. And he's like, heck yeah, the waves never been the same since then. Right. And they needed to do something, but the fact that they never talked to any of the surfers, and, Richard was saying, I never talked to anyone I've never heard anyone from the surf community. He was the most kind of like tied in, that they never talked to him. Right. So whatever that solution is, that the surfers need to be at the table when that's going on. And so that's kind of like what we try to do at Save the Waves and with the Santa Cruz World Surfing Reserve, and trying to get more surfers to the table, which can sometimes be a little bit more difficult because it's hard to, wrangle surfers, as you probably know. When the waves are good, you don't want to go to this 2-hour long meeting with the city of Santa Cruz. Right. So it's a little tricky sometimes, but going into like, the climate that we're in today, it's like, it's never has been so important to just attend a few of those meetings. And there are a few of these meetings with Resilient Coast Santa Cruz. I'm going out to one at the Seymour Center tonight at the Seymour Center. Oh, cool. And there's a few of those, events happening. So the city's trying. Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah. And it's also, it's not only just like the wave itself, but the destructive nature of the ocean. It's going to affect access. And, from roads to infrastructure to, like how you get into the water, which, kind of like down the line is going to affect that economic, impact that surfing is going to have. And
Yeah, sometimes it's like scary. Change can be scary. And I remember somebody like texted me a photo or something like that, and they had like a proposed, I'm not sure how far along it got or if it's still in the works, but it was like, it was this graphic that showed this like beach access down to the waves at Sewer Peak. And because that's falling into the ocean too, it's sketchy. Like to get in the water now, it's like there used to be this little like billy goat trail that you could kind of like skizzle down, and now it's like pretty sketchy. You got to find different ways to get in, especially at high tide. And but like the plan, like the photo that I saw, and I'm sure a lot of smart people worked on it, and I might not even be educated enough to even speak on it, but it just looked kind of like, I'm like, dude, that's like really sketchy. Like there were stairs like right down at the apex of where like the Sewer Peak reef comes into into the cliff. And have you seen that picture or?
Yeah, actually, no, it's actually been approved.
Okay.
I don't know when the construction's going to start, but the basis of that stairway is the owners there at Sewers they had updated their seawalls.
Right.
Because obviously there was the cliffs eroding right there, their property.
Yeah.
And so to mitigate those seawalls, they have to do some type of mitigation, and that can be up to, yeah, that's kind of like something that it falls in the California Coastal Commission. And yeah, they decided that the mitigation should be access right there at Sewer Peak. And
yeah.
so yeah, that's something that I've tried to talk to them about. And that is just kind of like another example of like where you're talking to surfers in this decision.
Right.
So that, yeah, so that's kind of going forward. I don't know when the construction's going to be going on, but question I have for you is like, I know they did that seawall at East Cliff.
Right.
I know there's kind of been a study out there on like the effects that it had on the waves and surfing, and you being on the east side, and I'm wondering if like ever since they put in that seawall, have you noticed any effects to the surf breaks on the east side?
I can't honestly say that I have, to be completely honest. You know, outside like the perspective of like visually and aesthetically, it looks like kind of like Disneyland. You know, it's like a little bit like faulty, fake faux rocks, which is like, you know, like growing up, it was just like scrub brush and like little like natural cliffs, and you know, to have that change was like pretty like jarring, like visually, you know, from an aesthetic standpoint. But you know, as far as like the wave itself, I don't know. Like I think that it's just such a hard thing, and that must be something that you guys are confronted with too, because you could put in these like these changes and like to the cliff, you know, armoring and stuff, and like potential like drawbacks and stuff, but we also have to understand that even if those weren't implemented, nature is going to change. Like for thousands of years, the coastline's been changing, and it's only natural that, you know, the waves themselves change. And so I think that's kind of a hard thing. And memory too, you know, it's like can be nostalgia you know, associated with how things used to be, and sometimes that can kind of like, in a sense, be deceiving, because it's really hard. Like sometimes I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So it's like, how am I going to remember like how the wave was in like 2000? And so is that something that kind of poses like some difficulties of like getting hard data about these things that are just like so complex, you know, from the ocean floor to, you know, sea level rise and all these kind of like factors that come into it.
Yeah. I think that's a really important topic to remember, and I think that's important for everyone to remember, that everything's changing. But then, yeah, you kind of have that memory of how good, you know, that one swell was in '82. You know, right? You kind of, growing up here as a surfer, you always kind of have those older guys kind of saying, "Oh, the waves were so much better back then," you know.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that's just a really good point. And, you know, the only constant is change. And especially here, you know, on the California coast, it's always changing. And so, yeah, I think it's like, you know, with those changes, how can we look to adapt in the best possible way? Yes, everyone's not going to get their way in some particular, you know, development or way or whatever. But, as long as we're like working together as a community, I think that's what's important. And that, yeah, kind of the surf, at least I'm just trying to sound the surfers to, you know, be a part of the process in, you know, the changes that are happening along the coast here in Santa Cruz. And, I think that's a really important point, is just, you know, things are changing, and the stories you hear, you know, are hard for people to remember, you know?
Yeah.
And so that kind of gets like transferred over time.
Right.
And yeah, not to get too hung up on it, you know, not look at it as a negative, but look at it as a positive, as we are here today. And, you know, there's a swell coming tomorrow, and, you know, I can surf those waves tomorrow. I'm going to get this swell, and what can I do? You know, my kind of like go abouts is trying to, you know, be positive every day. And, you know, you kind of have those like two people on your shoulder, right? You could feed the negative one or feed the positive one, and try and do, you know, feed that positive one every day to have a, you know, a good day. And yeah, so that was kind of a little random tangent I had.
No, yeah, I'm here for it. And but one thing that I do remember, like, and this will never be like stripped from my limited brain cell capacity that I have at this point, is that the Murph bar, that wave used to be so fucking good.
Yeah.
And like it, you know, it has like little like flare ups every once in a while, but like, is that something like? Because in my mind, it's like if you could put a wave in every year that just like it would draw so many people to go get like a, you know, have a surf and then go grab a cocktail at Palapas, or like, you know, to get a coffee at the Kind Grind, or, you know, Crow's Nest, go upstairs and get some calamari, you know, that's like, it feels like that would be something like, that's like a really, you know, tangible effect that I've seen from humans interfering with Mother Nature to, you know, inadvertently maybe to make a wave. Is that something that you're knowledgeable about what's going on at the harbor mouth, and as far as like where they're dumping the sand? And is that something that has come up with you guys and Save the Waves? Like, hey, like this is an example of like a wave that, like, you know, when it's doing it, like it just creates a perfect wave.
It's a good example, and one that I haven't really looked at specifically with Save the Waves, but yeah, like going back to like magazines and like, you know, passing along those stories in history is like, I have a very ingrained photo, I think, of Corey Lopez, you know, at the Murph bar on that left, and it looks like, you know, Chopu.
Yeah, I was out there.
Yeah,
dude, it was so nuts that day.
Yeah, it's like just seeing that photo is ingrained in your head, and yeah, seeing it out there live in person, you're like, why isn't this wave still around?
Yeah.
And that's a tricky, because it's like a man-made wave, right? Because it's like all the sand that they pump from the harbor, you know, dredge. So the city owns that dredge.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that, you know, the harbor district, they created that district to fund, you know, dredge operations, and they can ultimately create that wave. But yeah, now it's like, maybe it's that sand shortage that I was kind of talking about, and there's less kind of sand feeding the harbor, so maybe there's less operations that they need to do to dump that sand there.
Yeah,
maybe they're dumping it in a different area, more on the beach, I think, and kind of create, I'm not totally up to speed with that, but I think that's a good example of how you can create a wave like that people are like so psyched on.
Yeah,
it's getting like, I don't think it was a cover, but I think it was, you know, a 2-page spread.
Yeah.
In a magazine back
O'Neill
in the day.
poster too. Yep.
Yeah, so it's like almost outside of my like time of like when it was like super good. But that's a really good example of sand, right? And so like going back to like the sand nourishment and sand bypass studies, is you could create more waves with sand, you know.
Right.
Like all surfers kind of can agree that sand helps surf spots. And then you look at like Gold Coast of Australia, like Snapper Rocks, like that wave is one of the best waves in the world, and it's human made sandbar.
Yeah.
So they pump sand underneath and through a pipe from the Tweed, harbor and river right there.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a little bit of history about it is, you know, Kira used to be the ideal surf spot there. And when they started that sand bypass project, Snapper wasn't even a wave.
Right.
And I guess it took 5 years. Kira just became a closeout. So the locals are pissed. They're saying, this is the dumbest project you guys ever done. You ruined this wave. But then 5 years went through, and Snapper came to life as a world-class wave, and now Kira is still a good wave. I don't think it's as great as it used to be because there are a lot of sand there, but
Right.
now they're working on, when to turn on and off that sand. But that's just an example of like the Murph bar at like a small, or, Gold Coast is a bigger scale
Right.
of sand, creating waves.
Yeah, like theoretically they could like just dump a bunch of sand, from the wharf down to the harbor, and theoretically just create 4 or 5 different surf breaks. But and that's why I think it's really important, the work that you're doing is with Save the Waves, is to show these hard numbers about this is what surfing can do to impact our the livelihood of our city. And so you could come back and it becomes less of like a dude going like, hey man, like fucking put the sand here, man, it'd make it sick. You're like, no, like we can actually look at these ways to actually improve Santa Cruz's surfability, and that's a really important thing. So I'm really happy that you're involved in that, and I think it's really great to see like someone like yourself, like a really talented surfer, like you're just like amazing surfer, you're an amazing dude, but you found a way to kind of use that and leverage it for something to not only give yourself like a livelihood and a career, but to give back to the community that brought you this, this lifestyle. And so it's pretty amazing. And speaking of, your lifestyle and your surfing ability, is you've been aligned with O'Neill for quite a long time. And that's like, what a great partnership that is. And what an amazing brand to be involved in. Jack Jr. is my neighbor. They've got, Connor and his brother in there and his sister working there. It's like a real family type of operation. And so like, how does it feel to be like part of that family? And I know that you're doing a little bit of work for them as well too. So do you want to kind of touch on that, your like career with O'Neill and what it's meant to you to be with that company?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I think, growing up in Santa Cruz, O'Neill is that name that everyone recognizes, and being in the surf world, having that sticker on your board is the best sticker that you can have. So I feel very fortunate to be riding for them for 14 years now.
Yeah.
And so now I've transferred into like working a little bit with them, and Cold War Classic in 2022 and 2023 I was fortunate enough to help and put on. And yeah, I have good things to say about the O'Neill family, and it's so awesome to see like the wetsuit side of it really being, family owned and family operated.
Yeah.
JJ, Jack Jr. and Riley and Connor and Bridget.
Yeah.
All in-house every day, working freaking hard too. Like, there's days when there's, a lot of waves,
Yeah.
I think back then people would just go surf, but I think they see like how important it is to like put their head down and really do work for the company, or because they, are, obviously backers and just are taking really good ownership in it, which is, it's cool to see. And yeah, coming from, someone, Jack O'Neill, like such an inspiration to the world of surfing, with the wetsuit, but then also, creating like the Sea Odyssey. Like that was one of his biggest passions, is like getting kids out in the ocean for them to learn about the ocean and all the species we have. And so, no better company that I think to ride for, especially coming out of Santa Cruz, just calling it home for me. So, it's also fun for me just kind of seeing the behind the scenes of the surfing industry, and kind of, just seeing like how they're, making their decisions, and kind of like what we just kind of touched on, the surfing world and industry is so different these days, but to see a company like O'Neill, from the office side, I don't have it, anything but good things to say about how hard they work and how into surfing they are, like John Hunter, been designing the wetsuit for the last 30 years. That guy surfs more than anyone I know, and it's just the fullest of frothers that you can get. And,
right.
So yeah, all those people at O'Neill, they just live and breathe surfing, and it's pretty refreshing to see. And that's why I love just going in there, because it's just, surf. It's pretty rad.
Yeah, and then, touching on this, and I know it's like a difficult decision for these brands to make, and you have to really look at the return on investment, but like something like the Coldwater Classic, is such like a huge part of surfing in Santa Cruz, the history, and a lot of locals have won and kind of helped make a name for themselves by kind of like just killing it in that contest. But is in tying this in with your work with Save the Waves as far as like an economic impact, like Huntington Beach has been having the US Open for the past 40 years or whatever, and I'm sure it's a boon to their local economy, but like are there going to be more events in Santa Cruz, or is like how difficult is that to make those decisions, like for a company like O'Neill, for example?
Yeah, it's really hard because, yeah, like you said, the return on investment isn't really there like through a contest, but it's kind of the indirect return of, just people seeing the O'Neill branding and through the Coldwater Classic. And yeah, I wish that contest would happen every year because I'm sure, just growing up in Santa Cruz, it was the longest running contest in North America. And just having those pros like Kelly coming to town, that's pretty much what cemented my love for surfing, and seeing Jack on stage with his eye patch calling out, Santa Cruz, and all these pros are coming to Santa Cruz and they're saying how awesome this place is and how good the waves are. It was pretty funny, a little story when I was putting together the contest in 2022. So it was the first year it happened after a 7-year hiatus. And so the kids in 2022 hadn't seen it for 7 years, and they weren't even as excited as I was to like put on this contest. I was like, can you guys believe it? The Coldwater's coming back.
Yeah.
And they were just kind of like, not like they were excited, but they had no idea what it was.
Right.
And so they're just like, okay, yeah, cool. Like contest, like pros coming to town. Had 2022, Kalohe and Dino won. Griffin Colapinto came up. The waves were epic. It was beautiful out. Go to 2023. O'Neill's bringing it back to town. I asked the kids, you guys excited for the Coldwater's coming? Can't wait. Oh my God, Kalohe's coming back. Michael Dunphy's coming back. Like losing it because they knew what it was, and they knew that it was this like huge monumental contest that was like world known, world famous. And it was just like the biggest thing in surfing happening in town. Yeah. And they're all like so jazzed and excited about it. And I was like, yes, that's what I wanted to see. And that was kind of like the joy in bringing it back. And I think O'Neill obviously sees like how big of a part that contest is in Santa Cruz. And I think they would, more than anyone, love to bring it back. Right. But yeah, just like the surf industry as it is right now with sales and just, it's hard to kind of front that number of how expensive contests are to when you don't have like that, exact return on investment. But so that kind of ties into like, that surfing economic study at Save the Waves is like, hey, City of Santa Cruz, hey, County of Santa Cruz. I know there's, I know you guys have a hard time when it comes to budget, and sometimes it may sound a little silly to put money towards a surf contest. Yeah. But when you look at it in data and numbers on, hey, this sport here in Santa Cruz is bringing you $194.7 million. Can you put some of that aside towards a contest? Yeah. They were sponsors of the Coldwater Classic the 2 years that it ran. Cool. So can you help O'Neill a little bit more? Yeah. Put some money towards it, because you're getting, indirect expenditures from all the pros coming here, all the visitors. Yeah. Dude, like the year Autumn won, like 2023, it was like flat. The final was like essentially flat. She was like riding waves onto the rocks. Yeah. If you looked on the cliff, there was literally hundreds of people lining the cliff. It was a beautiful sunny day. People had come from like all over California to watch flat waves. Yeah. But it was the contest that brought them there. Right. And so it's like that, I don't know, that identity and culture of like surfing competition in Santa Cruz is so important. And the hard question of like funding is kind of that hurdle, but hopefully, through O'Neill and city and county and
bring it back maybe.
Yeah. Hopefully. Are there other sponsors out there? I know there's, a bunch of just people over the hill. There's a lot of money over there.
Right.
You know, how do you kind of tie into that and
Get a tech company involved or something, you know, like look out
Yeah.
maybe outside surfing.
yeah.
Yeah, and just to butt in really quickly is like, I think, you know, one of the things when the surf industry was just like booming, like a lot of like the owners of these companies were surfers, and they didn't necessarily like do things or like trips or contests looking at, I mean, I'm sure they were concerned with how much money it would bring as to their brand, but a lot of these owners, they did stuff because it was cool, and they fucking loved surfing, and it was like, so there's this like legacy behind it. So, you know, like you said, I'm sure the O'Neill family would love nothing more than to bring that back, and it's just a hard decision to make. So hopefully in the future, like, yeah, like maybe like non surfing endemic companies can come in, maybe help foot the bill, or, you know, the county of Santa Cruz. So hopefully that, you know, comes through in the future. But yeah, just kind of moving forward, you know, you mentioned your wife, Haley, is super supportive, and you recently had a young boy, Bear.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about, you know, what being a father has been like in your experience, and, you know, when you can hope to like share that with Bear?
Yeah, I hope so. That's kind of, yeah, like going back to that, our first part of the conversation is my dad getting me into surfing. And so, but I also see, as much as I want him to be a surfer and get into surfing, I know like how bad it can be to push him into it. Like I told you, my dad kind of pushed me pretty hard into it, and that kind of made me shy away from it. But yeah, being a parent is nuts. It's so full on and so much. You know, there's a lot to it, but I think right now it's just working, with my wife Haley, on like finding that balance and rhythm, because I want to be there for her too. I can't just go surf all the time and leave her, you know, with the kid. So we're working, you know, Bear just turned 1. We're working on just like that dynamic of, all right, you know, Haley, you go do your yoga class, I'll go surf. And there's trade-offs. You know, parents are like, so much respect for parents out there, and like just our parents too, right? You know, all the stuff that they did for us when we were just a kid and couldn't, you know, fend for ourselves is just out of this world love. And seeing the growth of time in front of your eyes, you know, that first year of Bear's life has gone by the fastest I've ever felt, but also the best year of my life. And yeah, there's, you know, a little less surfing these days just because, you know, the windows are a little bit slimmer, but I always come back a better person after I surf. And so, yeah, I think Haley sees that, and she knows how much I enjoy surfing. And so she sees how important it is to me. And you really got to like prioritize the things in your life. So I'm trying to, you know, stay off social media, Instagram, because I'll find myself just going on there for an hour when I'm like, I could be in the water for an hour. So I'm not on, social media as much as I used to be when I wasn't a parent, or just goosing around doing random stuff. It's I kind of, sometimes people are kind of like, I feel like maybe I don't talk to them as much, or like just hang in the parking lot as much, because it's like I'm there to catch waves, and then I got to go home. I got to relieve my wife for, you know, her yoga class. So yeah, it's a monumental shift in the lifestyle, especially just the first year. We're still kind of working out the kinks of just being a parent, you know, parenthood. There's so much to it. So you see some epic parents out there as influences. And here in Santa Cruz, like the lifestyle of in the summer times, you get to go to the beach and all the kids hanging out is pretty epic. And hopefully one day I'll kind of catch that surfing bug. Yeah. Like I did.
Totally. And, you know, I know that it's going to be a little bit more difficult now that you've got, you know, a little rugrat to tote around with you. But is there any places that you haven't gone in your surfing career that you would like really jonesing to like check out? Because one of the things about social media is that it might not tell you how to get there exactly where it is, but it opens up your mind. You're like, holy cow, like the world is a huge, you know, place with so many different like amazing waves. And is that something that, you know, you still kind of like is important to you as travel? I mean, sure, it's more difficult, but different places you want to go, or plans for surf trips in the future?
I think the number one goal of my family is to keep traveling. I think that's like the biggest education you can get. After I completed school at Cal Poly, my wife and I touched on a little bit earlier, as we traveled for 4 years around the world. And although I got a like degree from Cal Poly, I got a real world degree for traveling the world for 4 years. And I think that's especially surfing too, because like surfing is so universal. Like I loved competing in surfing because I would go to places like Japan, and it was like I couldn't even like communicate with my competitors.
Yeah.
You know, because they spoke Japanese and didn't know English. I didn't know Japanese, but I could communicate their surfing. I saw them surfing, and I was like, that's a sick backside snap.
Yeah.
I can communicate on that.
Yeah.
And so I think just going to, surfing communities around the world and being by the ocean, you just learn so much from so many places. Yeah. Like whether it's surfing or just the culture, whatever you want to dive into. Yeah. Go to those Paris trips, go to those Tokyo trips, and learn about, places outside of the waves too. So yeah, that's definitely our biggest goal, is to like continue traveling. We're going to Kauai in December. We always like to go back to the North Shore and just, be a part of that, surf mecca there.
Yeah.
While continuing to, do some travels in Europe. Never stop traveling.
Yeah. And yeah, surfing, what a cool thing. You could have this language barrier, but something just so like sublime as like sharing like a perfect barreling wave with someone. Like you could not even be able to like communicate, like in words what's going on, but just to like hear the excitement or be around that energy of like just being amongst perfect firing waves. And that's gonna improve your ability to enjoy life, is to put yourself in those situations. And I saw you posted some like pretty sick clips and like videos of El Salvador, and that's like another example of like somewhere that's really the government really like saw the effect that surfing was having on their economy and stuff, and they basically like renamed their city like Surf City, or like San Salvador's like
Surf City.
Yeah. And so like that's pretty cool. What was your experience there, and seeing like how the government and just how the local population embraced the surfing endeavor?
I went down to Oriente Salvaje, which is like in the southern part, or actually it's in the eastern part. If you look at El Salvador, it's west to east. It's like very horizontal, which is interesting. And that's like, Surf City 2, as they call it, because Surf City 1 is up in the north where they have that CT event right now.
Okay.
It's in the south, it's like pretty rural. There's like not a whole lot down there other than beautiful waves that have been peeling forever without anyone's kind of, knowing about it. It's cool. Santa Cruz guys been going down there for a while. I was talking to Joey Thomas, who's gone down there for a long time.
Yeah.
Got a really fun swell when I was down there. So fortunate to luck into that with my friends. Randy Bonds was there, so it's cool to surf with him down there. It's actually a World Surfing Reserve, which is another program. It's a program of Save the Waves, like there is here in Santa Cruz.
Okay.
So I was able to link up with a couple of the community members down there.
Oh wow.
And so go on a surf trip, but then also hear about what's going on there. And they're working on kind of like mapping out their zones and districts there, and so they're trying to look at like ecotourism, where like the government is really passionate and blowing up surfing. So you kind of want to do that fine dance, right? Where like you want to develop and promote surfing, but you don't want to destroy these waves over it.
Right.
You don't want to build these resorts for people to come to, but then it's going to, just ruin or, affect the wave in some ways. So we're kind of, that's their biggest kind of issue there, is working with the government. And sometimes that can be pretty hard if the government, has ideas in their head that they want to get done.
Yeah. I think just recently, like Chile, they just like announced that there were some waves that are like, actually getting actively like fucked up, that are like world-class waves. But I think the government just like released some statement saying that they're going to be more involved in protecting these waves. Do you know anything about that? Yeah,
I was actually just looking. I saw actually an Instagram post. So yeah, I definitely do go on social media. Obviously, everyone does. But Ramon Navarro posted about it, that the Chilean waves are federally recognized and protected.
Wow.
a similar law was passed in Peru quite a bit ago. I'm not sure on the exact date. I think it was around, like 8, 9, 10 years ago. But yeah, like look at that, federally protected waves.
Yeah.
Chile's got so much coastline. I haven't been there, but I heard it's really similar to Santa Cruz. It's kind of like you flip the map over, on its side, at the equator, and kind of, land Chile and Santa Cruz and kind of that same axis. And so pretty awesome to see protection towards surf breaks, federally recognized.
Yeah.
Pretty rad.
Yeah. So hopefully in the future, like, I think, the work that you're doing is just like amazing. And I'm sure that, it's going to make some positive effects here in Santa Cruz in that regard. And, I'm just stoked that there's someone like intelligent and well-spoken who can represent us knucklehead surfers, and so, it's amazing to see that. And I'm just like, obviously we just kind of know each other peripherally from surfing and growing up in Santa Cruz. But I'm proud of you for what you've been doing. And I think it's just an amazing thing. And I hope that you get all the success in the future. So, but I think that for now, this is going to be a good place to peel off. And I just, enjoyed talking with you. And I hope that, things go good with raising your son. And I hope to see you at some more swells here at Sewer Peak.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Got to get you over to the west side.
Yeah.
Get you out the lane. So we'll have to kind of keep in touch about that. But I appreciate just being on the podcast. I think it's awesome that you kind of can give time to people to kind of tell their story. I think that's really important. And I hope there's groms out there listening because, Santa Cruz is such an important place and such a special area for surfing, kind of like what we talked about growing up, and we're there for the groms these days. And hopefully through outlets like podcasts and stuff, they can hear about stories of, what it was like for us kind of growing up. And so that's kind of like, that's my guiding light is, looking at waves. So kids have waves to surf just like I was when I was their age. But then, we're there for you groms too.
Yeah.
There's a really good group of surfers coming here in Santa Cruz, boys and girls.
Yeah.
And we love to see it. And so, I appreciate you giving me time to tell my story. And it's always nice seeing you out in the water too. I know you're very respectful, as we kind of talked about,
Thanks.
And I always looked up to your surfing too.
Sick,
at Sewer Peak. The lefts, I cannot go left. So the goofy foots do get their waves, which is awesome to see. But I got to drag you out the lane sometime. Get on some Middle Peak lefts.
Let's do it. I'm fired up. So anyways, this has been the Split Peak Soup podcast. We're presented by Santa Cruz Vibes magazine, and you can pick those up. We come out quarterly, so there's some cool stuff. We're just working on a few articles right now for our winter issue. So Shaun, thank you so much, and we'll have to check you guys out for the next serving of Split Peak Soup.
Thank you.
You.